What is up, guys? We're back with another video, and today we have the very first episode in my brand new series called the Advanced Iron Fist Guide series, where we're going to go through different components of Iron Fist gameplay and really break it down way beyond the surface level and a basic level and really get into the small things. Because if you're trying to rank up on Iron Fist, it is the small things that you do that really matter most. And there are so many facets to Iron Fist gameplay. Unlike other characters, which may be more straightforward, there are so many different facets to Iron Fist gameplay that make it such a deep and interesting character that you need to be very thorough about and with all facets of your gameplay. So for the very first episode, I want to go through his main four, I guess you could say three, but four abilities per se. And I really want to break it down onto how you should be using each ability. And I want to get to a more technical and specific level beyond just, the basics and things that everybody already knows. If you are someone that is upper GM or anywhere above that, you're at the point with Iron Fist gameplay where you understand about 95% of how to play Iron Fist. It's all about the little things. There's something in the way you play that is holding you back. And me, as the person making this video, I don't know what that is. It's different for each person. There's some kind of mistake or some habit they have that is deeply holding them back. Because if you made it to upper GM or above, I think that's a good cutoff. You, for the most part, know how to play Iron Fist. There's just something in the technicals of what you're doing that isn't quite correct. Maybe it's multiple things, maybe it's just one major thing. I don't really know. So my hope with this series is, after going through all these different videos and these different components, you'll eventually see something that you go, wait, yeah, I haven't been doing that correctly this whole time. And then you think back to the way you've been playing, and maybe you can identify mistakes you've been making much more easily. So for the maybe newer players to Iron Fist, I am going to very briefly go over the basics of the character for each ability, and then I'm going to jump straight into more advanced tips and more advanced ways for players that may be more familiar with the character. So starting off with the basic left click, the most important thing you want to know about this is going to be your primary mode for killing squishies, especially during your dives. Your basic 5-hit combo into your execute. It is extremely powerful on isolated targets. Very, very powerful. And even I see players that are in GM that they are going for their dive and they think they're going to land the kill, and so they jump straight to their flurry punches. And there are multiple reasons why this is not what you should do. Number one, if there is a DPS, it is going to be so easy for them to shoot you, because your one powerful thing about your left click, and it's very underutilized by people, is your mobility. Like, if you see me jumping on a target here, I can kick, I can jump, and I can basically, if you have your 3 jumps, so wait a moment, you can basically fly around the target to avoid their fire. And this is so important when you're maybe in a duel with, let's say, a Punisher. And if you're in a Punisher and you just go straight to your flurry punches, and you didn't get any overhealth from your block, he's just going to shotgun you straight in the head. Imagine if he has infinite ammo. You're just going to die, especially if this is in a brawl situation. It is extremely important that when you're using your left click, whenever possible, you're using it to position yourself around the target. Another really strong example is when you're going for your dive, and let's say this target here is my dive target, right? And you go in for your dive. You want to position yourself above their head when you actually land. There are many times where I will dive on a Luna from a very high position like this, and I will land straight on the head. And it makes it so much harder for them to actually freeze you, let alone attack you and actually react to your dive. This is extremely important. For those of you that don't know, using your left click does reset the cooldown of your block. So one of the biggest uses of your left click is when your block is on. Let's say you use your block and you absorb some damage, and you need to retreat out of the fight because you're taking too much damage, or you're not going to get the kill and you need to back out. Usually what I do is, I know I didn't get to this ability yet, but usually what I will do is, let's say I use my block, and now it's on a 15-second cooldown, and I just blew up, and I don't want to jump back in without my block. And I got 9 seconds. Let's say that's their front line, and they have so much damage. Let's say they have an infinite ammo Punisher Bucky, and I will blow up without my block. I can't just rely on jumping back in, left-clicking, and getting my block back. That is my primary use for the meditation. When you meditate, you get up to 450 overhealth, but it doesn't last long, which is why I rarely use it for my dive. Because by the time I've already dove, right now I'm down to like 330 health, and it's rapidly disappearing. You reduce your uptime when you do that. So for me, the primary use is I use my meditate when there's a long cooldown on my block, and I'm going to blow up if I jump in. Then I will jump in and I'll hit the tanks a little bit to get my block back. Now, one more important thing about your left click is the actual lunge itself is so important for switching to targets mid-fight. Let's say you jump on a tank. Let's say you have a brawl. The biggest use for this is in a brawl situation. You have a brawl and you see a DPS looking to shoot at you. And you want to switch targets because maybe someone else is low health, or maybe you're low health and you want to get out of line of fire, but you don't have your kick for whatever reason. You don't really have a way of getting out. One way to get out is to use your jumps, but let's say you can't for whatever reason. There's so many uses to this, and one of the uses is getting out of line of fire because of how far it lunges you. You jump to this guy here, you're taking damage, you jump over there, and it helps you escape better. So there's so many different uses to the lunge and to this actual left click that it's important to know when to use it. It's not really going to do a lot of damage on tanks. Your primary use with using it on tanks is to get your block back. So to show you an example of what I meant with diving on top of the Luna, is let's say you get like this, and right here. This here is the best possible diving position when you're diving an enemy healer. Right on their head. I guess it was a lot harder to do in the robots because they're hitboxes. But when you land with your dive, always go for this position and try to hold it. They're going to be moving, but you're going to have your jumps, and so you're going to be able to hold an upper position. If you just come from the side and you're at this angle here, it's going to be so easy for them to turn around, shoot you, and freeze you, and their reactions will be much quicker. Versus when you're like this, it's so much harder for them to react, for them to ping you, first of all, for them to react, for them to shoot you, for them to freeze you. It's going to be so much harder. Next, onto your block/flurry punches. This is arguably the most important ability in your kit, and it's not. I find even when I was doing VOD reviews for a Grandmaster reviewer, and even in GM, I noticed a lot of people, they skip to the flurry punches far too often. This is a huge no-no. Let's say you dive this target here. Let's say I dive the Galactabot, right? And then I start taking damage and I block. So when you block, you have to always check how much overhealth you get. Let's say you block and I get 350 health now. I'm 350 health. That tells you how long you could stay in the fight for. If I block and I go up to 450 or 500 even, I know I could I'm a tank right now. You're a tank. You have the 30% damage reduction as well, so your effective HP is 650. If you actually get that much HP, I will probably be sitting on the target, regardless of who it is, for a while to cause maximum distraction, because that is a lot of overhealth. Now, if you don't get much, it kind of tells you how long you can stay in the fight. If their DPS and their tanks are turning to you and they're peeling and you don't get much overhealth, I'd probably back out. Let's say you only get to 350, or even worse, nobody shoots your block. Likely, I would back out. If there's a DPS on you, and this is in the neutral, by the way. I'm not talking about a brawl. I'm talking about in the neutral, where your tanks are fighting on the front line. I would probably back out of that situation where you used your block and no one shot you, but then people start shooting you. The biggest problem I see is people start their tunnel vision, right? They'll use their block, and then they will tunnel vision down their target after they've used their block until one of them dies. Either you die or they die. That will get you killed. Maybe you'll land the kill if it's a very low rank, but it's just extremely high risk and not necessary. What you need to do when you're blocking is when you use your actual block, you need to use this period of time to look around you. So let's say I jump on my target here, and then I use my block. Now, see what I did just there? I checked. Okay, the Bucky over there shooting me. The tanks are over there. You immediately have an idea of what the battlefield looks like. You're like, okay, I'm not going to kill the Luna here. The Bucky's looking at me. And you check the front line, and you know, okay, maybe I got 400 overhealth. I don't need to use my kick to get back to the front line. Let's say the front line is over there, and you've used your block. You could immediately use your kicks and jump back onto the target. I will get into the more specifics of how you should be using movement in a future video, but for now, I just want to cover the basics of the core abilities, as well as some more advanced tips. In future videos, I will cover a lot more in detail about specific parts of the rotation. But that's just a brief overview of what your rotation might look like. So despite the fact that you do more damage to tanks with your flurry punches than squishies, you shouldn't always go on tanks with it, because that block period right there, I can't tell you exactly who you should go on, because it depends on the fight. It depends on the fight and if there's any isolated targets. When you actually use your block, that going on the tank might be the best choice, or it might be staying on the target you're in. Let's say I use my block and I look and no one is shooting me. I'm going to stay on the healer. I know I'm good to go. I'm going to keep tunneling down the healer into my execute. That is what I'm going to keep doing, because I know no one's shooting me and no one's peeling. And let's say someone starts peeling you mid-attack or someone starts healing. Let's say this Galactobot goes back to full health. Your damage doesn't come out fast enough. I just retreat. I use my kick or my jumps to get out. So next is your kick/execute. This is an incredibly powerful ability, and it often has mixed use between players because some people use it to disengage, execute, or even engaging. And it really depends on the fight and what the situation is. Oftentimes, I find myself not needing my kick to disengage unless I'm very far from my team. Because there's so many situations where you ideally want to save your kick, because sadly it's on an excruciatingly long cooldown of 12 seconds, which is pretty brutal considering you don't really have a lot of damage to begin with. You really need your kick to kill Squishy. So let's say I jump on a target and I use my block and I figure out that I need to get back to the front line. I can't stay on the target. Ideally, you're not far from your front line, and you could just jump back because you have the overhealth. You're going to survive. You can jump back and jump on the tanks, and then maybe if you take more damage still on the front line, then you jump behind cover and you use your heal. Ideally, you've saved your kick there. Now you can go back in, punch the tanks, and you still have your kick. Now, sometimes that's not something you could really do, and so in situations like that, always check if you can save your kick. If you are so far, or you're really low, like if I'm down to 45, maybe 150 health, but it's going really quickly, I'm not going to risk jumping back. I will kick back to the front line. If I have a lot of health and I know I can get back, I'm going to use my jumps. Or if I have a lot of health, my team is really far. There are times where your dive is really far, and you need to, and you know you're not going to be able to just jump back to your front line. Then I will use my kick. Now, for using it to engage, I do often use it to engage in brawl situations. Sometimes I use it to close the gap on someone I can't get a jump on. Like, let's say for whatever reason, you are wall running here, and there's a target there you want to get to, right there on that platform. And you cannot get the jump on them. They see you, and you want to approach them. If you go in like this, they're going to shoot you and mess up your dive. Or if you go in like this and you block, there's a good chance they whiff their shot, or they just don't even shoot you. Now you're really fucked up your situation because you don't have your block, you didn't get a good dive, and you barely have any overhealth. You have to leave. You cannot engage that, depending on who the target is, but you can't engage. In a situation like this, it becomes very useful to maybe jump to the side and use your kick to engage, because now you've closed the gap and they don't get the jump on you. Now you could start your engagement, block, and maybe win the 1v1. Yes, you don't have your kick, which is unfortunate, but in a situation like that, you really don't have much of a choice. If this is a target you need to go on, and they see you, and for whatever reason you have decided that this is the target you need to go on in this situation, that is when you want to use your kick to engage. Is when you know you can't really reach them through a surprise, or if time is of the essence, your team is brawling and they're not looking at you, and maybe your team just killed one and you're up one and you're trying to be aggressive. Now, the other situation I would use it for engaging is in an actual brawl. Let's say I'm on this target here, and I just killed them. I just killed this target, and they're up to 5 people, and I see the healers over there alone, right? Sure, I could jump over and take my sweet-ass time to get over here. But if we're in a brawl situation, and I have good health, and we have the slight edge, I'm going to kick over and just immediately start pouncing on them. They're isolated. We're up on the brawl by one person. We just need to get as much damage as possible and maximize uptime. In a situation like that, I'm going to kick over. Now, maybe if it's 2 healers, I might not, because they might heal each other and they could still recover the fight. But if I see an isolated target in a situation like that, there's a good chance I'm going to kick over to them. But it's important when you do that you're not alone. If you are alone, again, that's why I say it has to be a brawl. Because if you're alone and you do something like this, it is so risky to use your engage mid-combat if you're in a brawl. Like, let's say it's the neutral, and you use your kick because you're trying to engage. You use your kick to go from the tanks to their backline. I didn't have my kick there. Let's say you're on the tanks, and you use your kick to go from the tanks to their backline. That is a huge mistake because you're in the neutral. Your team is on the front line still. You've basically got no value from that kick. Now you put yourself in a dangerous situation with your backup escape route is no longer an option now, and also you can't execute the healer. It is a huge mistake. So on to the meditation. I know I covered this a bit earlier, but your primary use for me with the meditation is mid-fight when your block cooldown, you use your block, you punch the tanks, right? You punch the tanks, you're taking too much damage, you jump out of the fight. Now I've got 10 seconds. Sometimes you can just go back straight in. This is up to you. This has to be your assessment. Sometimes you can just jump straight back in. Maybe you have 400 over health. Maybe you got some good health. Maybe you know you're not going to blow up. Maybe you're Groot walled them and you know you can get some free hits. Maybe they're tanks alone. Whatever reason, you know you can jump in and get some relatively safe hits on the tank. But if you can't and you know you're gonna get destroyed, like let's say you jump on the, let's say once you evacuate, you wall climb, and you're about to dive, but you know you see a Bucky next to their healer and you have 8 seconds on your block, and you don't want to dive the Luna that's next to a Bucky with your block on an 8-second cooldown. You don't feel like you're gonna get your block back because you could dive and the Bucky will pull you and you'll die. You need your block for a dive, especially now if the Luna's isolated. Again, it has to be your assessment. There's no absolute rule here. Let's say you go for the dive and the Luna is alone. Then maybe I wouldn't try to meditate there. If I know I'm going to get the free hits off, I'll just go in with the 9 seconds left. But if you know you can't, that is when I'd meditate behind a wall, get up to 450 health, and jump in straight away. Because now you do have the effective maybe 420 health, because you're going in straight away. You're not going from a really high point where you're... It's not the first dive in a neutral. There's just no point doing it if you already have your block, because the health decays so quickly. It's kind of like fake health, but it'll keep you in the fight long enough to get your block back. If it's just a little bit too long, it probably will. And that's my primary use for it. Besides the fact that it does just heal you in general, and it's a good ability to use when you need to be healed. It's kind of a self-explanatory ability. Like, there are some times where you want to jump back to your front line, and you don't want to waste time meditating. And by the way, some people might say, why don't you just use it before you dive anyways? Because even if it's an extra 50 health, it's still an extra 50 health, right? The important thing on this character is maximizing uptime. When you're meditating, you are sitting still. You're basically out of the fight, disabled for a couple of seconds. Uptime is so important because your team is fighting. Your team is fighting constantly. Every second you're not in the fight is every second your team could now... The scales could be tipped towards the enemy team and they could get the advantage. A Widow could get a headshot on your Luna. Now she's low health. And now there's more pressure. And you're not doing any pressure. You have downtime. So it needs to be your own assessment. If you're going for your dive and your team has just barely started engaging... and you know that you have time, then maybe go do it. But the second thing is also, it makes noise. It makes noise. There are times where if this is a Luna right down here, right? This is a Luna. They don't see me. And I meditate right here. They could hear me and look up. And so it's just not worth the risk 90% of the time. So for your last kind of ability, it's your wall running. Now, I'm not going to get too much into detail on this because it's pretty complex in terms of the engagements in movement and positioning, which I will cover thoroughly in my next video. But for the basics of the wall running is I will almost very rarely am I not starting a fight using my wall running. You always want to engage with the upper hand, like from a point like this where they don't see you and you can get that with that left click jump over their head. That is one of the most important uses of your wall running. Is almost every single neutral I go into with my wall run. It is very rare that I don't. There are some situations where I don't, but that has to be your call if it's a situation where it's just not optimal. Like, let's say you are in a brawl and your team's already brawling. There's no point in diving. You just want to get into the fight. Let's say you died and you're coming back and your team's brawling. There's no point setting up, right? This is basically setting up. You're getting to a point where they don't see you. It's extremely important to always set up before every fight. Like, let's say you win the fight and you're anticipating the enemies coming back. You want to get, like, right here. I just found a spot like this. Let's say they're coming in, let's say there's a tunnel there and they're coming in. You want to sit here in a position where they won't see you and just kind of hold it. Sometimes there's nowhere to sit and you'll just kind of hold like this. Let's say they're coming through this door here, right? And you just want to hold this position. A position where they can't see you using your wall run, and just wait. Wait till they all come through and then dive their backline. That is the main function of wall running. You almost always want to use it to start pretty much every engagement. I don't want to cover that too thoroughly and too in detail because I will get to it in my next video. But anyways, guys, that's it for my my first video. If you have any specific questions about Iron Fist, do let me know because I want these videos to serve as my primary way of providing advice to people. So if you have any questions about how to play Iron Fist, I will try to respond in the comments. And in future videos, I will go into games and kind of show you certain things in the rotation. This video is just kind of more like focusing on the core basics, so that way you can understand maybe what I'm talking about in future videos, because I don't know what level you are when watching this video. I want to make sure I'm covering everything. So that is the first video, guys, on the core abilities of Iron Fist and how I think you should be using each ability. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and make sure, if you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn the bell for notifications so you can see when my next video is. I do live stream every week my top 500 games on Iron Fist, so if you're interested in that, stay tuned, and stay tuned for the next video. I will be covering probably movement and positioning. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. As always, take care.